Hi all, it is always fascinating to see the clash between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. Let's look at the clash in round 8 of the Sinquefield Cup. They kind of have a thing going on Twitter, etc. It's really quite fun as a spectator to see this rivalry. And also stylistically, they're a bit different, so it really does make for great chess rivalry. And, Nakamura's up there, around 2 now, so he's got the ranking, but he just hasn't got the record so far against Magnus Carlsen. Never beaten him in a classical time control, and here he is with the black pieces. Let's see what happened. d4 for Magnus, d5. Very solid approach. He's not risking the king's engine. He wants to play like a safe opening. Problem with a safe opening, often they lead to like draws statistically, but against Magnus Carlsen, so what if he plays for a draw? If he plays a super solid opening, he doesn't want to give White, say, in the king's engine, you give White a space advantage and quite a lot of central control. Here, he just wants to firmly grip the centre squares. Okay, so knight c3, and we have this trendy bishop e7. Instead of like knight f6, it gives White some lesser options anyway here. So bishop f4. I mean, if White really wanted bishop g5, let's have a quick look. Knight f3, knight f6. I guess there's bishop g5 here, but on knight f3, maybe Black's got some options as well to consider. But no, usually it is like that. But bishop e7 is quite trendy. So we see bishop f4 though, knight f6, e3, castles, a3. Yeah, this is. Actually, on Livebook, there's 76 games with this compared to like nearly 5,000 with this. So A3's a little offbeat. And we see the reaction now. The usual statistical move B6, I think Sparrow mentioned this as the move to play here against A3. There's 32 games of that. There's 20 with knight BD7. Nakamura chose C5. This is quite active. And it stops these plans with c5 we're seeing recently, where White's using this system with bishop f4 and c5 later, because a3 betrays an idea that maybe c5 and b4 to get a queenside clamp and space advantage. So I guess it's designed against that. But we see now d takes c5, forcing move. Knight f3, not tempted to kick the bishop just yet. Knight c6, queen c2, queen a5. And this is the most popular move. We seem to have transposed into something quite popular here, because there's over 700 games from this position. The transposition, for those opening minded, the transposition to something really popular, this was like 15 games here, but it's this position we hit on a kind of mainline position from somewhere else, by the way, where there's hundreds and hundreds of games. So here, White often castles queenside. There's over 300 games of that. Rook d1, there's 300 games of this. This is all well trodden. Bishop e7. Now, quite often knight d2 is seen here. We have bishop e2. That's very popular as well. Over 100 games. Knight e4. This is slightly rare on the rare side. D takes c4 has been seen over 70 times. Example like this. And slight advantage for White, maybe. Okay, but Black's like resolving that central tension with this. Now, knight e4, yeah, there's 25 games of this. It's meant to give us small advantage for White, statistically. CD, knight takes c3, queen takes. But here, it's supposedly about equal, actually, this particular line now, statistically. There's still been about 10 games here from this position. 11 I see in live, but including this one now. So rook takes d5. Bishop takes a3. So what have we got from the opening? We've got basically a queenless endgame. Most of the pieces still on apart from the queens. So a couple of knights have been exchanged off. So Black's got past a pawn potentially. Or are these pawns going to be weak? Are they going to be pressured? We see knight d4, inviting Black to heal the pawn structure. But if he doesn't, then, I don't know, maybe this is kind of uncomfortable. Knight b5, knight c7. It's just uncomfortable to leave that central knight on d4 on general grounds. So it's actually taken, which improves white's structure in the center. Okay, we see b6. And then the kings just stays in the center with king d2. Interesting position. I don't think black wants to go chasing this pawn. His king still might be under fire. And there's also other possibilities like rook d7 coming up. So we see bishop e6, rook b5, keeping the pawns in check, stopping a pawn advance here indirectly. Bishop d7, rook b3. So it seems now the scene is set here that white's center is more connected than before, and he's just going to put some pressure on the queen side, kicking this bishop first, bishop e7, bishop f3, and you look at these bishops, very nice. It seems white has emerged with something now significant. Black counterattacks and gets a little bit tangled here with bishop a4. The bishop can be potentially awkward here. Now, if that's not played, this does look uncomfortable. Maybe if the rook moves, maybe this one just comes in and hits a7, then what? Can't move that without losing that. So this is starting to be an extremely uncomfortable position. And look at all these pieces hitting the queen side potentially. Every single one virtually. With the king in the center holding the center, yeah, it's like white's having a great time here without having much of a downside. It's just got loads of pressure on the queen side. So it's understandable kind of this move to try and create some complexity out of this. Otherwise black's going to be facing huge pressure. Rook b2. Rook a8. Yeah, the bishop is preparing to kind of use itself to block the a file with b5 now. Rook a1, b5. So black seems to have avoided a really uncomfortable position, but he's still in quite an uncomfortable position because actually now we see this pinning move, bishop c6. Okay, the a5 pawn is urgently supported, but these pawns are now harassable with bishop b7. These bishops are working so well together, controlling all the key squares. If it moves up, then maybe bishop c6. So actually we see a counter-attacking move against this one, bishop d6, trying to relieve the pressure and end up protecting the pawn. That's refused. And now a5. And now the pawn is harassed again, bishop c6 with this pin. But now, because that bishop's controlling that diagonal, there's no problem with rook b8 here. So what has Magnus done? He hasn't won a pawn yet on the queen side, but his center is really cool, and also he has potentially, when prepared, this move c4, exploiting that pin. First he protects this bishop here, rook fd8. Now with c4 there comes bishop b4 check maybe, so the king actually moves out of the way of this bishop. So this bishop seems kind of stranded at the moment. Bishop f8. Okay, so here, after bishop f8, white now plays bishop d4. Nice central move. So yeah, the pieces seem more central. This bishop just seems stuck at the moment. It seems a very difficult position for Nakamura to defend. f6. Now white really might delight in playing c4 at some point. At the moment it's check. So we want to use this pin, or rather Magnus Carlsen wants to use this pin. King e4, so something like c4 coming up to use the pin, try and wrench the pawn out of black's hands. Bishop d6. Now here there might be an idea. Well, you'll see that this pawn's vulnerable here, but also it seems c4 is attractive, but there is also an active idea in f5 check from black to be able to play the check and potentially taking here potentially. But at the moment, of course, it's protected by the bishop. But there's a couple of resources which need to be watched out for under the right circumstance. The main one, f5. So it might be worth white playing g4 at some point. Here, though, you've got to be factoring in, taking the pawn and rescuing the bishop. But Magnus controls that e8 square, so it doesn't have to worry about rook e8. So can he use the pin? Well, he plays c4. And black indirectly defends now b5 with bishop b4, very resourceful move. Or kind of maybe only move to save a pawn. Now it's here that, okay, there isn't the bishop takes h2 anymore. And in fact this means we're left this f5 resource. And maybe there's an argument here for shutting it down. Just leaving black in a difficult looking position. g4 wasn't played. But it does seem to leave black in pretty difficult position. This pin here, the rook can't go to the centre file. Pawns are locked down. It's standard strategy. If you look at, especially like British Grandmaster Michael Adams, standard strategy, try and paralyse all the opponent's pawns. That's why Adams is sometimes called the spider. In his high, he masters these positions like, paralysis. Like a spider paralysing its prey. Yeah. So g4 might be a kind of Michael Adams type move, trying to fix these pawns. It's strange, slightly strange maybe, that this resource is allowed potentially now, because bishop a7 is actually played. Now here it doesn't even seem that clear, because the bishop is still protecting the pawn. We've got this protecting this. So why is f5 actually a viable resource here? It is actually played. Why is it a viable resource? This is a good question. Actually, let me just check this 100%. King takes f5. What's the worst that can happen? It seems bishop c3, skewing the rooks. Rook takes a4 is better for white. So black might not be in a good position here to actually get away with this. I don't know, he's getting away with f5 check, but white doesn't have to, of course, take that material, and the engine suggests not taking it is actually a little bit better. In fact, Stockfish here is recommending king e3 or king f3. I mean, king takes f5 is also a valid move, it seems here. So anyway, I'm going to turn that off. It's a bit of distraction. King f3. Okay, an interesting position. Does black want to move this rook? Well, he does. He doesn't want to play bishop c3 here. This resource is quite important, like taking on a4. So he plays rook bc8. And now c takes b5. Yeah, here on bishop c3, I think white just takes here and gets loads of pawns for the exchange. White can simply, I think, just get tons of pawns for the exchange. That'd be fantastic. No, black can't do that. He plays bishop takes b5, though. Very interesting. Bishop takes b5. Taking out that important b pawn first before doing this skewer. So he does actually go into this position where the rook is against two bishops, which technically is pretty bleak. But what else does black do in this position? It seems white's play is culminating in material gains here, the queenside pressure. His bishop's now hanging. What does he do? It's an improved version over bishop c3, surely, to take on b5 in any case. There's not too many choices. The rooks are kind of strangled. There's no squares for them. All the squares have been taken away. Alright, so bishop takes b5, yeah. And I think this, well, I think black's play bishop c3 at least. But this position here, after rook ab1, bishop takes, rook takes, looks very, very promising indeed. Black does take this pawn on d5. So it is a pawn as well. So a rook and pawn versus the two bishops. Now here, many commentators have indicated about this game, that actually the two bishops probably need the help of the rook. It's a very interesting scenario to be in. From a practical point of view, the two bishops can complement each other, attacking on the light and dark squares. And sometimes with a rook, imagine a rook here complementing a bishop, the king might be more prone to attack, because the bishop pair is like an attacking player's tool, part of the toolkit, especially in middle games. But it's very helpful with the rook. You can still get a very strong attack. Imagine like a pawn being flung to h6 to weaken the diagonal, and the rook coming to the 7th. You can imagine good coordination between this team of players. But the team is simplified now, and Magnus himself, I think, has called this a moment of insanity. He actually played bishop e3, which allows this rook b8, essentially simplifying the position. So here, let's see, bishop a4 might have been a better choice, just to preserve the two bishops. Of course, in retrospect, this sort of move, although there might be a temporary like check, maybe so what, bishop e3 might be possible. It looks possible. And there's immediate threats like this. And when we start fixing the pawns and playing like this, and the rook comes back to the 7th, this looks very, very promising. So it's strange. On move 39, this is approaching time control move 40, like bishop e3 was played, and it allows this simplification with rook b8. And it's not so easy now. With this pin, white is forced to play this. Counterpinning, counterpinging. Rook takes b2, so a pair of rooks have come off. So it's the rook versus the two bishops, but black's got this pawn as well. Maybe Magnus thought, well, if he can get this pawn eventually, and on these pawns weak, he's going to win this anyway. How easy is this? Bishop d4, rook b1, king e2. We see now a4, g3, a3, king d2. The rook's got no real entry point to attack the pawns. This is covered. This is protected. The bishops are really looking great, but it's still tricky. h5, h4, because maybe black might be tempted to fragment white's pawns. King h7, bishop c4. Now there's a threat on the cards. That's protected in advance. King c2, rook e1, bishop e3. It looks as though white's going to be making progress here if he can collect this a pawn. But now black gets really quite tricky in terms of pawn fragmentation. He does play a fragmenting pawn sack here with f4. So 1 point, I believe, if taking, then we can go for like this pawn and then try and get an h pawn. So f4, interesting resource, very good resource in circumstance. Takes for a2, the idea to get rid of one of white's pawns here, sacking this pawn. So threatening and quitting, it must be taken. Check, and Naka can succeed in getting that f2 pawn. So it's only these two pawns now. And here is where I'm going to have to do a Benny Hill rendition, which I've practiced a little bit before starting this video, because I don't really want to comment on these next few moves, boring you. Quite a few moves. Okay. And we reach this position, sorry, pardon me. Okay, so here, king d5 at move 90. It wasn't that easy, apparently, especially after losing the f pawn. Okay, here we reach an interesting position after king d5. Rook f1. bishop e4 check. Here, a climactic change is happening with the loss of the g-pawn. King g6, bishop takes g6, and now we have rook takes f4, kind of securing a draw. It's going to wipe out all of white's pawns now, which is a good drawing strategy generally, to wipe out the opponent's pawns. And here we have it. So a 95 move draw. Yeah. So I was a bit naughty there, skipping quite a few moves. Do you want to see that in slow motion again? For move 45, without the background's music. Yes. Basically, it seems as though the king was cut off for a moment. Bridge was built for the king. The king crossed. Wasn't such a big deal. It seems another kind of force field against the king. Let's cross here. And yeah, this pawn coming under attack. Then these pins stopping the king from doing too much, keeping white's king at bay again, indirectly. Then over here, keep harassing and pinning to keep white's king at bay. And again, checks and more checks, until we get this position where now it seems as though king g4 is on the cards. Black's king has actually got quite active here, and then we have this exchange here, sacrificial exchange, getting rid of all of white's pawns. Yeah, there you have it, 95 moves. So it was a draw. I don't usually cover draws, so this is a special boring treat for you. No, it's not boring because it's like the status of the players, the number 1 versus number 2 in the world. But the critical thing about it, I think a source of regret maybe for Magnus, is that bishop e3 move. He had a great imbalance of material. So if we go just back to that critical position, where it seems all of his opening thing did get an advantage on the queen side, and he had to preserve, it seems, this rook. I think this rook, many commentators are agreeing now, a move like bishop a4, and let's just check this once again. Here, the engine suggestion is actually, one of the moves is actually bishop a3, but this is the difference between humans' computers, because bishop a4 I think is much easier to play, and it does actually come up as one of the top choices as well, or even g3, leaving things alone at the moment. G3, just g3. Black's not forcing the rooks off here with g3 or bishop a4, but with bishop e3, black is forcing the rooks off. Now, to an engine, there's no real difference, right? No significant difference, it seems. Well, unless you put it on for quite a bit. We're talking like 1.42 with bishop e3 to advantage to white, g3 1.88, and bishop a4 176. But this is the thing when following engines in your own games and post-mortem analysis. How easy is the position to play? This is a big question. Yeah, you don't just look at these engine evaluations. How easy is it to play? And how easy is it for the opponent to play? Now, bishop a4, yes, this because it gives white lots of ideas of team coordination. The rook on the 7th, maybe a pawn coming here, maybe the bishops as attacking pieces just going for the king. Look at some games of Capablanca, he's often gone for a king attack in simplified positions. The annoying check, king e2, and there's another annoying check, maybe you could call it annoying, but we reach this position, say, then the rook can come to the 7th, and it's going to be difficult for black. Another check, maybe leaving the pawns looks a bit scary. Maybe the king can come here. So this scenario here, we've got that idea of the rook on the 7th, an Imzovician idea, having the rook on the 7th. We've got some potential coordination now on g7, and we can start, even if it's bounced off the 7th, it starts to get interesting. Yes, white starts to increase in the right to like +2 here. So, and maybe at this point can consider something like rook e5 in a more favourable circumstance. Here, rook e5 would actually be quite important as an example, because rook d5, rook c4, bishops can be a tactical liability. But this transition here might be an important upgrade. So easy to analyse this freely in retrospect when you're not playing. So here an improvement 3-2 on there, and maybe not taking off, maybe just blocking that pawn for a bit and trying to advance these. It's still going to be a long-winded process, actually. To be fair, let's have a look at this position. Is it so easy? I think Nakamura had a point about the rook versus the two bishops fundamentally. If we can get this position, I think it's going to be a win eventually. It just needs a bit of work and very, very precise play. Even this position. Okay. Perhaps everyone is being a bit optimistic about simply bishop e3 being outlined as a clear blunder, because I think there is some work to do, even if the rook was preserved. At some point, to make progress, you might have to give up the rook, have a trade of rooks. Okay, chess is really complicated. There are some easier games to look at on the channel. I hope you got something from this. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.